What happens when unconditional love becomes conditional betrayal? Lotso, the strawberry-scent bear from Toy Story 3, wasn't born evil. He was born to love and be loved. But somewhere between hugs and heartbreak, something fundamental broke inside him. Today, we read diving deep into the darkest corners of a toy's mind to understand. Is Lotso truly a villain, or is he the tragic result of psychological trauma that could happen to any of us? Picture this: a bright pink teddy bear, soft as clouds, smelling like fresh strawberries. Lotso was everything a child could want in a companion. He wasn't just a toy. He was a vessel of pure love, designed for one purpose: to comfort and protect his owner, Daisy. In those early days, Lotso lived in paradise. Every morning brought new adventures. Every evening ended with warm embraces. His world was simple, beautiful, and complete. The psychology of toys in the Toy Story universe mirrors our own attachment theory. They form deep, meaningful bonds with their children, just as humans do with their caregivers. Lotso's identity was entirely wrapped up in being Daisy's favorite. This isn't unusual. Many of us define ourselves through our relationships and the roles we play. For Lotso, being Daisy's bear wasn't just what he did. It was who he was at his core. The strawberry scent that emanated from his fur wasn't just a feature. It was his signature, his way of being memorable, his unique gift to the world. In psychological terms, this represents what we call identity markers, the special qualities that make us feel valuable and irreplaceable. But here's what's fascinating. Lotso's entire sense of self was built on external validation. His worth came from being chosen, being held, being loved. This created a psychological foundation that, while strong in good times, contained the seeds of its own destruction. But there was something darker brewing beneath that innocent pink exterior, something that would soon shatter his perfect world forever. Then came the picnic, a seemingly perfect day that would become Lotso's psychological ground zero. Picture the scene. Daisy, exhausted from play, falls asleep under the warm sun. Her parents, thinking they've gathered all the toys, pack up and drive away. When Lotso awakens, he faces every toy's worst nightmare: abandonment. But this wasn't just being forgotten. This was being left behind by the one being who gave his existence meaning. In human psychology, we call this attachment trauma, when the primary relationship that defines our sense of safety and worth is suddenly severed. The journey back home became Lotso's first descent into darkness. Mile after mile, day after day, he trudged through uncertainty, clinging to hope. This is where we see the first psychological defense mechanism emerge: denial. She's waiting for me, he tells himself. She needs me. But when he finally reaches Daisy's room, he discovers something that breaks him completely. She's replaced him. Not just with any toy, but with another Lotso bear, identical in every way except for the love they shared. In that moment, Lotso experiences what psychologists call narcissistic injury, the devastating realization that he wasn't as special or irreplaceable as he believed. The replacement bear represents everything Lotso once was: innocent, hopeful, loved. Watching Daisy cuddle this new version of himself forces him to confront a horrifying truth. Maybe love isn't permanent. Maybe promises can be broken. Maybe he never mattered as much as he thought. This is when his psychological transformation begins. The brain, desperate to protect itself from unbearable pain, starts rebuilding his worldview. If love leads to abandonment, then love is dangerous. If trust leads to betrayal, then trust is foolish. And it was in that moment, watching his replacement receive the love he once knew, that something fundamental shifted in Lotso's mind. The innocent bear began to fade, and something much darker started to emerge. What happens to a mind when its core belief system collapses? Lotso's psychological transformation follows, a predictable yet devastating pattern that psychologists recognize in trauma survivors worldwide. First comes the cognitive restructuring. His brain literally rewires itself to make sense of the betrayal. Love is a lie becomes his new truth. Children are cruel becomes his gospel. These aren't just bitter thoughts. They're survival mechanisms designed to protect him from ever experiencing that level of pain again. Watch how brilliantly Pixar shows this transformation. Lotso's leadership at Sunnyside. Daycare isn't random tyranny. It is a carefully constructed psychological defense system. By controlling every aspect of the daycare, he creates the illusion of never being vulnerable again. In psychology, we call this hypervigilance, an exhausting state of constant alertness for potential threats. His treatment of new toys reveals his displaced trauma. When he forces newcomers into the caterpillar room to face the rough play of toddlers, he's not just being cruel. He's unconsciously reenacting his own abandonment. "Welcome to Sunnyside," he says. But what he really means is, welcome to the real world, where love always ends in pain. The most chilling aspect of Lotso's psychology is how he's rationalized his cruelty. He genuinely believes he's teaching valuable lessons. "You think you're special?" he asks new arrivals. This isn't just intimidation. It's his twisted attempt to spare them the devastating discovery he made. That specialness is an illusion. His relationship with Big Baby is particularly revealing. He keeps his old companion close, but in a state of emotional dependency. Big Baby represents Lotso's own inner child, traumatized, silent, and controlled. By dominating Big Baby, Lotso is essentially keeping his own vulnerable side locked away. The strawberry scent that once represented comfort now masks the stench of emotional decay. He still smells sweet, but underneath lies something rotten. The psychology of a being who has transformed love into control, care into manipulation. But the most terrifying realization was yet to come, that his pain had evolved into something far more dangerous than simple bitterness. There comes a moment in every villainous journey when they cross a line so fundamental that redemption becomes nearly impossible. For Lotso, this moment arrives when he faces a choice between salvation and revenge, and chooses revenge. When Woody reveals the truth to Big Baby, showing him the heart drawn on his foot, proving Daisy did love them, Lotso has an opportunity for healing. The evidence is undeniable. They weren't just discarded toys. They were loved, missed, and mourned. A healthy mind would see this as a chance for redemption, a path back to emotional wholeness. But Lotso has invested too much of his identity in his victim narrative. Accepting that Daisy loved him would mean confronting an unbearable truth. His years of cruelty were based on a lie. His psychological defense system, built on a foundation of betrayal, would crumble entirely. This is what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort of holding contradictory beliefs. Lotso's mind can't handle both Daisy abandoned me and Daisy loved me, so he violently rejects the evidence. He destroys the heart on Big Baby's foot, literally erasing proof of love. But here's the most chilling part. Even when faced with the truth, Lotso doubles down. "She replaced us," he screams. Notice how he generalizes his pain. It's not just about him anymore. He's created a worldview where all children are inherently cruel, where all love is temporary, where all toys are destined for abandonment. This generalization is a key marker of traumatic psychology. When we're deeply wounded, our brains often expand that wound into a universal truth. Lotso can't just be the toy who was abandoned. All toys must be destined for abandonment. His pain becomes cosmic law. The most disturbing moment comes when he abandons Woody, Buzz, and the others in the incinerator. Here, Lotso becomes the very thing that traumatized him, the abandoner. He recreates his original trauma, but places himself in the position of power. It's a twisted form of psychological mastery over his wound. And in that moment, as he walked away from their desperate pleas for help, Lotso completed his transformation from victim to perpetrator, proving that pain, left unhealed, always seeks to replicate itself. What Lotso represents isn't just fictional villainy. It is a clinically accurate portrayal of how trauma reshapes the human psyche. Recent neuroscience research shows that severe emotional trauma literally changes brain structure, particularly in areas responsible for trust, empathy, and emotional regulation. Studies on attachment disorders reveal patterns strikingly similar to Lotso's behavior. Children who experience early abandonment often develop what psychologists call disorganized attachment. They simultaneously crave and fear emotional connection. They want love but believe it's inherently dangerous. Lotso's controlling behavior at Sunnyside mirrors what researchers observe in trauma survivors who develop narcissistic defense mechanisms. By creating a rigid hierarchy where he holds absolute power, he ensures he'll never be vulnerable again. It's not about evil. It's about psychological survival. The most fascinating aspect is how Lotso's trauma creates what psychologists call repetition compulsion. He unconsciously recreates the conditions of his original wound, but from a position of control. By subjecting other toys to abandonment and cruelty, he's essentially trying to master his own traumatic experience. His inability to accept evidence of Daisy as love demonstrates another clinical phenomenon: negative cognitive bias. Trauma survivors often become unable to process positive information that contradicts their wounded worldview. Their brains literally filter out evidence that challenges their protective narratives. Research on childhood emotional neglect shows that victims often struggle with what is called emotional object constancy, the ability to believe that love persists even when the loved one is absent. Daisy's replacement bear shattered Lotso's belief in permanent love, creating a psychological wound that colored every subsequent relationship. Perhaps most chilling is how accurately Pixar portrayed trauma contagion. Lotso's psychological wounds spread throughout Sunnyside, creating a culture of fear and hopelessness. This mirrors real-world observations of how unhealed trauma in authority figures creates toxic environments that damage everyone involved. The strawberry scent becomes a perfect metaphor for what psychologists call false self, the sweet exterior that trauma survivors often develop to hide their inner devastation. Lotso smells like comfort but embodies its opposite. What we're witnessing isn't random cruelty, it's the precise, predictable psychology of a broken heart trying desperately to avoid being broken again. But here's the most haunting question. Was Lotso beyond redemption, or did his tragedy lie in choosing isolation over healing? The psychology of trauma suggests that even the deepest wounds can heal, but only through connection, vulnerability, and the courage to trust again. Lotso's greatest tragedy isn't that he was abandoned. It's that he chose to abandon others in return. When Big Baby finally stands up to him, we see a glimmer of what healing might look like. The courage to face truth, even when it's painful. Big Baby chooses growth over grudges, healing over hatred. The ending scene, where Lotso finds himself at the garbage truck with a different child, presents him with yet another opportunity for redemption. A little girl sees his strawberry scent and smiles. Pure, uncomplicated love offered freely. For a moment, we wonder, will he choose differently this time? But Lotso's response reveals the full extent of his psychological imprisonment. He's become so identified with his wound that he can't imagine existing without it. The identity of abandoned toy has become more familiar than the risk of being loved again. This mirrors what therapists observe in long-term trauma cases. Sometimes the wound becomes so central to identity that healing feels like death of self. Lotso can't imagine who he would be without his anger, his control, his protective cynicism. The most profound insight comes from understanding that Lotso's behavior, while destructive, makes perfect psychological sense. Every cruel act, every manipulative word, every controlling gesture serves the same function. Never again will he be surprised by abandonment because he orchestrated himself. Yet Pixar, S genius lies in making us understand that Lotso's story could be any of our stories. We all carry wounds. We all risk building walls so high that love can't reach us. The difference lies in our response to betrayal. Do we let it teach us caution or trap us in isolation? The saddest part of Lotso's legacy isn't the toys he hurt, but the love he rejected. Somewhere in that garbage truck, a strawberry-scented bear sits alone, surrounded by the very abandonment he spent his life trying to avoid, never realizing he abandoned himself first. Perhaps the real tragedy isn't that he was forgotten. It's that he forgot how to hope. Lotso's story isn't just about a toy gone wrong. It is a mirror reflecting our deepest fears about love, loss, and the courage to trust again. His transformation reminds us that we all carry the capacity for both healing and harm. The choice isn't whether we'll be wounded. Life guarantees that. The choice is whether we'll let those wounds define us or refine us. In the end, Lotso's greatest tragedy wasn't being abandoned by Daisy. It was abandoning the possibility that love, despite its risks, might still be worth the gamble.